Hello, listeners and fellow book lovers. Welcome to The Book Snug, a bi-weekly conversational podcast about books and the reading life. My name is Stephany.
And I'm Julia.
We're a mother and a daughter who love reading and talking about books, the ones we adore and the ones we don't. We're delighted you're here, so grab your favorite hot drink or ice-cold beverage and settle in for another cozy, bookish chat.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Julia.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm good. It's a Saturday. I'm not at work. It's hot outside, so whatever. But
We're in the cool basement.
We are.
Which is technically the Book Snug. Or I guess I should say we're in the Book Snug, which is technically a cool basement.
But we're in a corner of the basement packed with pillows and blankets and towels. I think there's a towel in there somewhere too.
Right. So it actually feels cozy,
Yeah.
even though we're in the midst of hot August. It's not that hot outside right now, though.
No, but it's really muggy.
Is it muggy?
Really muggy.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. This corner actually, I'm not going to use the right term and I apologize, but it feels like a fortune teller or gypsy's tent. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
With the blanket hanging over
From old time carnivals and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. So it's kind of fun.
We should post a picture, but I don't want anybody to see our setup because it's not very professional looking.
I think it's okay. It shows the ingenuity of those who are trying to pursue a goal.
Right. To get good sound
Yes.
out of a basement.
Yes. This poor light, though, has seen better days.
It's been a workhorse for us.
The amount of tape that's still stuck up to it. Oh, my word. Well, are you drinking anything fun today?
I'm drinking a raspberry herbal tea by Bigelow.
Oh.
It's a very pretty rose color for sure. And it just tastes like raspberries, which seems appropriate for summer.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you tried any of the plurked tea yet?
I did.
Oh, did you like it?
Yeah, I tried both.
Oh.
They're both very good.
Yeah.
I'm cutting way back on my tea consumption. And
Well, that's going to be a problem for the podcast, Mom.
well, I do drink tea, but I've been drinking entirely too much. And I just feel like I need to step back.
Okay.
So I do like to have a cup of tea in the afternoon, and I'm doing an herbal tea today instead of a full-on tea leaf tea.
Gotcha.
What are you drinking?
Well, all of my tea stuff is packed in the garage.
Yes.
So
My garage, actually.
yes. Oh,
Yeah.
Moving is a mess. I can't wait to get the keys next week. But I am drinking a peach. Yes, this is a true peach boba tea. And if you've never heard of boba before, these are little tapioca pearls that add a texture to the tea. The tea itself tastes like a very juicy peach ring.
Okay.
So it's a little sweeter than I like.
Okay.
But I was just really craving a bubble tea while we were out running errands.
Did you make it or
No.
did you purchase it?
No, it probably is easy to make if you can get a hold of the boba, and then it's just the making the tea.
All right.
Dear listeners, today we have a bit of a throwback episode. We are talking about books from elementary school.
Yes, we are.
And
Very nostalgic.
yes, for us growing up, at least for me, Mark, and Aaron, August meant the end of summer, beginning of real life.
School.
Yeah.
And all the school responsibilities.
Yes. So Mark and Aaron would have football camps, and then I would have band camp. And for a while growing up, our beach trip fell right at the beginning of August, and we got into everything else from there.
Yeah, that kind of initiated the going back to school activities.
Yeah. So as August has rolled around this year, and we were thinking about what topics we wanted to talk about and what books we wanted to bring to the table, for us, it just made sense to talk about books from school.
Yeah.
And we have a couple other episodes coming up that are going to look at this in other ways and other facets. But today we are starting with books from elementary school. And because elementary school has been quite a bit for both of us quite a while ago.
I went to elementary school in the 1970s.
Yes.
And very early 80s.
Right. So,
and you were the 2000s, right?
Yeah. Early 2000s. Yeah.
So it's been a while.
Yeah. So some of our elementary school memories are quite hazy.
Yeah.
So in trying to organize this, we were going to do a book per grade. And for us, elementary school was first grade through, kindergarten through sixth grade.
Because surprisingly, Julia and I both went to the same school district.
Yes, we did.
Not the same elementary school.
No.
But yeah.
Not the same middle school, but the same high school.
Same high school.
Yes.
But definitely same school district.
Yes. And parts of the high school looked exactly the same when I was there when you were there.
Right. This was not purposeful. It's just where we ended up. Jay and I did live outside of the school district. We just ended up back here because it was convenient for work.
Right. You tried to send me to a different school district at one point.
We did. I mean, yeah.
Well, when I was in kindergarten, it wasn't,
Anyway, we both went to the same school district, so the setup for school was the same, even though it was decades apart.
Right. We don't think that any stories were read to us in kindergarten, at least books that we could remember.
Oh, I know stories were read to us, but they were picture books, and I don't remember.
Yeah. And sixth grade, we both think that sixth grade for us was more working towards and gearing up for middle school instead of sitting on the carpet listening to story time.
Even in fifth grade, my teacher read to us. But he read to us, we sat at our desks. It was not a go sit on the rug and listen to your teacher read after recess. It was nothing like that. Right. But he did take time every day to read books to us.
Yeah, it took on a little bit of a different format.
Yeah. But sixth grade, absolutely not. We were supposed to be serious about everything. We were big kids and we were heading to middle school. So no more reading out loud, which is really a shame. Yeah. Because I think that's an experience everybody should have throughout school, not just in early elementary school.
I agree. And for me, sixth grade, I might have been in third grade when standardized testing hit.
Okay.
And so by the time I hit sixth grade, and I mean hit as in like nationwide first wave of standardized testing, by the time I got to sixth grade, there was a much larger focus on prep for those tests. So any downtime that we did have wasn't, go pick a book and we'll do quiet reading for 45 minutes. I mean, there was some of that, but it was a much... At least from my memories, there was much more of a focus on make sure you have all of your information ready to go for the tests.
Yeah. I think that's true.
Yeah. For those of our listening friends outside of the United States, when we say second grade or fifth grade, whatever, the age groups we're talking about are like 7 or 8 for second grade, and then fifth grade is 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And so by the time that you would hit middle school or high school, you're working your way through the teens a little bit more.
You're definitely hitting puberty and adolescence.
Yes, after elementary school.
Right.
So just for some clarification, the books that we're about to talk about are books that teachers read to us during elementary school. These are books that were read either during class group reading or story time after lunch, but it was books read by our teachers.
Picked by them.
Yes.
For us to listen to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then why don't you start us off with second grade?
Okay. So we're going to skip first grade too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will talk about that in a second.
Well, it's good because I have very few reading memories of first grade, even though I was so angry after the first day of first grade that I didn't learn how to read. I came home and told my parents that they didn't teach me how to read in first grade, and it was only the first day of school. But other than that, I have very few memories of first grade, and actually my first grade teacher was kind of scary. I was a little bit afraid of her.
Oh, no.
She was older. She was very near retirement. I think she retired at the end of my first grade year. And I was afraid of her. So first grade was not, I don't have many great memories. My second grade teacher, Mrs. Paul, was a very tall woman. She had short brown hair, very kind brown eyes. I remember that. And the book that I remember her reading to us, although I know she read others as well, the book I remember her reading is James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl. I loved this book so very much. I would come home from school every day and at the dinner table give a blow-by-blow description of what happened in the book that day that Mrs. Paul read to us. if you're unfamiliar with James and the Giant Peach, I'll give a brief synopsis. It's about a young boy whose parents, I think, are killed in a car accident. I'm not sure it's ever actually described what happened to them. They just are no longer there.
Right. I mean, it's insinuated it's a car accident, but it's never clearly said.
So James goes to live with his very nasty aunts. Their names are Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spica. Aunt Sponge is small and round, and Aunt Spica is tall and very thin. And they are just incredibly mean to James. And one day he wakes up and the peach tree at the bottom of their garden, which never has done anything since he's lived with his aunts, suddenly grows an enormous peach. And it causes this big commotion. And his aunts do not want James anywhere near the peach. But one night he goes out to the peach and investigates and finds an opening in the bottom of the peach. And he crawls through this tunnel and ends up in the pit of the peach. And there he meets a group of very unusual insects. And they end up taking this terrific adventure together. I just was so enamored by this book, amazed by the bugs and the things that they did. It was just so incredible to me. It blew my mind.
Yeah.
And that's why I just every night couldn't wait to tell my parents and my brother and sister about the book, because it was just so spectacular. Roald Dahl has such a gift for taking normal everyday life things and making them magical and a little bit weird and just, I don't know. He also wrote Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. He wrote Matilda.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Yeah, so he has written many, many beloved children's books, but this I think is my favorite of his. And I'm pretty sure it's because Mrs. Paul read it to us in second grade.
Well, and most of the stories that you've listed have some kind of a happy ending. Yes. Like a happy ending that children love.
Right.
So like I love Matilda and I love the happy ending in that.
Yeah.
It's like a found family story at the end for Willy Wonka, Matilda, and to a degree even James and the Giant Peach.
They might be unbelievable endings, but it doesn't matter. They're still happy.
Yes. Oh, I love Matilda.
Anyway, I loved this story so much. Couldn't wait to share it with my kids. So you, Julia, and your brothers, Mark and Aaron. And then we watched the movie, which is an animated...
I think it's
CGI.
claymation.
Claymation? Yeah, no, I
think
you're
it
right.
is.
Yeah, claymation movie, James and the Giant Peach, directed by Henry Selick, and it's produced by Tim Burton and Denise Denovi. You can really see Tim Burton's influence on the movie, and it is also delightful.
Yes.
The music is great.
It's Randy Newman music.
Yes, it's just wonderful. So I love the story all around. Great experience for me.
Well, in the movie, I don't remember the first time I watched the movie, but as I watched it when I got a little bit older, I realized that there are some actually really scary parts in the movie.
Yeah.
Like super scary.
And I think kids can deal with the type of scary that he brings to his books.
Yeah.
Another book that he wrote is The Witches.
Yes.
And that's scary. I mean, it deals with real witches that don't like children.
No.
But that's also a good book. So.
Ooh, the movie came out a little bit ago, and I think Anne Hathaway was in it.
Was she?
Yeah. I didn't get the chance to see it.
Movie.
Yeah.
Angelica Houston was in the movie that I saw.
I love Angelica Houston.
Yes, and she made a very good witch.
Yeah. Well, she made a good stepmother in Ever After, so I'm not surprised that she made a good witch.
She's a great actress.
Yes. Well, and she does a good Morticia. So yeah, a witch just makes perfect sense for her career choices.
All right, Julia, tell us about a book that one of your teachers read to you.
Yes. So
Are we staying in second grade?
Well, I think I should offer this disclaimer. Some of my early elementary memories are super foggy.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but I know that there are books that I was read. I just don't remember which teacher it was. So like I know during early elementary school, I was read The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we were read Charlotte's Web. Yeah. I know that I was read a couple other stories, and I just can't remember which grade I was in.
Okay.
So the book that I want to talk about here, I think it was second grade. It could have been first grade. I don't remember.
Okay.
But I am going to talk about my second grade teacher here. And that was Mrs. Dangro. So even if Mrs. Dangro didn't read the story to us, I remember her class specifically because every month she had a different poem for us to memorize.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember half of the poems. Like, I couldn't have told you one way or the other about what they were now. But I think to a degree, maybe that's why I associate this book with that grade, because of the emphasis on literature, as I think I want to say that. So the story is Sadako and the 1,000 Paper Cranes. I think the second disclaimer I want to say is, for whatever reason, a lot of the stories that I remember from elementary school are all really sad stories. And I don't know why. That is so
Interesting, because I remember very few sad stories that were read to me in elementary school.
Well, and I think it kind of goes back to the fact that maybe I was learning how emotionally sensitive I was at this point in my life.
Could be true.
And so these books that had higher emotional impact, I remember because of the emotions.
Right.
Instead of, like, I know we listened to Charlotte's Web or Edward Tulane, which is an upsetting story.
Yes. For a highly sensitive person, it would be very upsetting.
But I think that's why I remember some of these books more so than those happier tales, because they hit my emotions big time.
Right. So, and really, we're talking about the books we remember the most. Yeah. So this makes sense. Yeah. And it will make sense why I remember the books I do as well. We can talk about that when we talk about third grade.
So this story, Sadako and the 1,000 Paper Cranes by Eleanor Coerr, and it's illustrated by Roald Himmler. So this is the story of Sadako, who is a young girl living in Hiroshima, Japan. She was 2, living about a mile away from where the little boy bomb was dropped.
Yes.
And as she gets older, she begins to develop dizzy spells and purple splotches on her legs, swelling behind her ears. And her mother calls it the atom bomb disease. Mm-hmm. And she goes on to be diagnosed with leukemia. Doctors tell her she has just about a year left to live. And so she recalls this Japanese myth that if somebody makes 1,000 paper origami cranes, that the gods will grant a wish. And so she sets out to fold 1,000 paper cranes in order to get her wish to not be sick anymore. And so it's the story of making those cranes. I can't speak to the structure of the story or the writing, and this I think goes exactly back to what we just talked about, of I remember the emotions of this story, and I remember thinking, this is so sad. I also couldn't find if this book if it's a true story or not. There's sections. I was
going to ask you if this was based on a true story.
Yeah, there's sections that I found while researching this that it's told from other family members' perspectives. But I couldn't find if it was fiction or if that was real life. I also remember sitting on the floor listening to the story and looking up and seeing paper cranes, but that could have just been my brain putting the story, like imagining the story, or if my teacher really did have hanging cranes. And if you've ever folded origami cranes, they are meticulous. And if you get one little crease wrong, like you get a rumpled looking goose.
I was going to say, you get something weird that's not a crane.
Right. And so I can't imagine folding 1,000 of them. Yeah. So a sad little story to be listening to when I was 7 or 8 years old.
Yes.
But
Mrs. Django was really trusting her young students to be able to handle a story like that.
And for the most part, I definitely think that most of my elementary teachers equipped, at least me, I can't speak for the rest of my classmates, but created a space where we could talk through some of these difficult things and think about them in the concept of literature, in reading, but then also in real life as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my Debbie Downer of a book I remember
Wow.
from 2nd grade. Do you have something happy for 3rd grade?
I do. Most of my books are happy until we get to 5th grade, and then things get a little weird. But my 3rd grade teacher was Mrs. Riley, and she tended to pick books that were vintage, 1950s, 1960s. And the 2 books I remember her reading to us are both from that time period. The first book is The Enormous Egg by Oliver Butterworth. This is the story of Nate Twitchell, who has a hen that lays a ginormous egg. And the egg hatches, and a triceratops is sitting in the nest. Now, books like this only work for kids because as an adult, the first thing you think of is how did a triceratops get in an egg that a hen laid? But kids don't have to have those connections. At least I didn't have to. I was very able to just let the story roll. I didn't care if the things didn't line up, if the parts of the story didn't make any sense. I just wanted to be entertained. I sometimes still feel like that, but only with fantasy and speculative fiction. Anyway, I'm digressing. The whole story is about how Nate decides he wants to keep this triceratops, whom he names Mr. Beasley, as a pet. But as Mr. Beasley grows, everybody realizes, of course, that he is not going to be a typical pet. So they have to come up with a solution for that. And that is the rest of the story. I love this book as well. It was very imaginative and creative. And as little kids, when you're listening to a story, you're not expending the energy to read the words. So you have more mental space to create a setting and an image in your mind. And I loved being able to think about a triceratops being in Washington, D.C. and what would that actually be like. So this book is from the 1950s. Took me a little bit of digging to find it. I had to actually Google a description of the plot of the story to get the title, but it is The Enormous Egg. The second book that Mrs. Riley read to us is a book that I have shared with you and your brothers, Julia, because I loved it so much, and I just thought it would be a book that you guys would really like too. And it's called The Wonderful Flight to the Mushroom Planet. This is by Eleanor Cameron. This is a book about 2 young boys who see a classified ad in the newspaper to build a spaceship. Mm-hmm. And the person who placed the ad his name is Tycho M. Bass. He's a teeny tiny little man. Mm-hmm. And the boys go to see him. He explains what he needs. He gives them the fuel for the spaceship, and they actually build the spaceship from trash.
They do.
And fly it to this teeny tiny little planet that is very near the Earth that people don't know about because it's so close to the Earth, nobody can find it. Mm-hmm. Again, this is a book that my little 3rd grade brain could just imagine in detail what was going on. I just thought it was so cool that you could build your own spaceship and fly into outer space. Mm-hmm. It's a great book. I loved reading it to you guys, and I'm pretty sure you all read it on your own.
Oh, yeah. I have a number of times. This book, for me, is one of the pillars of my childhood.
Yeah.
Up there with Inkheart and Aragon and The Magic Tree House and Chronicles of Narnia.
Despero.
Yeah. It's one of those books. My Father's Dragon, that you read to us at night. And so reading it for me on my own is a very nostalgia trip because I'm remembering all of the times laying in bed, listening to the words and thinking of what's going on and
putting the images together in your head.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Great book. I'm so thankful for Mrs. Riley for reading those types of books to us because they just really draw on the imagination and the I don't want to say gullibility of childhood, but that sense of wonder and willingness to believe things that aren't believable and yet are so wonderful to believe in.
Right. And I think it's the first of a series too.
Yes. The Wonderful Flight to the Mushroom. I think there are at least 2 books after. I only ever read the first one because I'm horrible with series. I'm still horrible with series, but you can read the first book and be completely satisfied. You don't have to go on and read the other books. And I think that's why I never did.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I mean, I have never read The Enormous Egg, but Mushroom Planet, The Wonderful Flight to the Mushroom Planet, I think is a perfect book for the wide-eyedness of childhood, like creativity and imagination.
Yeah. And belief.
Right. And I love space. Like I would love to be able to get into space in my lifetime. Not if it's going to cost me an arm, leg, and my heart, but I would love to get into space. And I don't, I've never wanted to go into space to see the Mushroom Planet, but the sense of, I could build a rocket and I could get into space. It's a very tantalizing idea at a very young age.
And do it on your own with no adults. Like everything that happens here happens with kids.
Right. And the parents are like, all right, go ahead.
Yeah. That's the other thing. I mean, in real life, it would never, ever, ever happen. But it worked for me 100%.
Yes. It's a fabulously fun story.
Well, Julia, in 3rd grade, were you just as sad as you were in 2nd grade, or is your book going to be a little bit more uplifting?
Well, it's a happy book.
Okay.
But 3rd grade was my least favorite teachers, I think. I want to say that nicely.
Okay.
So my time in 3rd grade probably was not as enjoyable as 2nd grade.
So overall.
Yeah. Yes. In 3rd grade, my teacher was Mrs. Wright. So the book that I remember most clearly from 3rd grade is The Year of the Dog by Grace Lin. And I would kind of compare this to its much mature cousin, Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, as it's kind of the same idea of a young teenager. In this book, it is Pacey, who is navigating early teenage years. In this case, it's a Asian family. I believe it's a Thai family.
Okay. And
navigating those cultural differences within her little community and the Western world in which she lives.
Okay. Is she living in the United States?
Yes.
Okay.
Or Canada, one of those. But I compare it to Persepolis because the main character in Persepolis is kind of navigating what it means to grow up in a shifting cultural time.
A difficult situation culturally.
Yeah.
And politically.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, The Year of the Dog. This is taken directly from Goodreads, as I figured that was just going to be the most true to story way to do this.
Yes.
Goodreads says, it's the Chinese Year of the Dog, and as Pacey celebrates with her family, she finds out that this is the year she is supposed to, quote unquote, find herself. In this book, there are universal themes of friendship, family, and finding one's passion in life, which makes this novel appealing to readers of all backgrounds. I remember most clearly while reading this story, Mrs. Wright had us do reading journals, for sake of a better description, where they were journals that we then blocked off for different sections per chapter. Mm-hmm. And for each section, while Mrs. Wright was reading, we had to sketch what we were listening to. So I remember sketching the Chinese, maybe they were Chinese, maybe Pacey and her family are Chinese, but the Lunar New Year envelopes, the red with the coins, and the celebrations of the New Year, and all of the different little things that go along with that. I also remember learning how to draw a dog, which sounds so silly, but on the cover of this book, there's a dog. And in the book, Pacey talks about learning how to draw said dog, and she walks you through the steps. And I remember learning how to do that.
Using the number 5?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then from that point on, throughout the rest of the school year, I was doing little doodles of dogs everywhere because it is just a couple of simple steps. this book is fun. It's funny. It's lighthearted. And I really liked that it was a glimpse into a culture that up until this point, I hadn't had much exposure with.
Yeah.
And I just remember it being a really nice reprieve between like some of the other reading materials that we were reading that just felt very cookie cutter, copy paste.
Not interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this book was a lot of fun.
It is. There is some interesting research that shows if you doodle or focus without really focusing on something else while you're listening to somebody talk or somebody read to you, that you tend to have better recall, that you remember more if you're doing something else along with listening.
Yeah.
So maybe that was Mrs. Wright's way of helping you absorb the story and remember it.
Sure. And I can definitely see that as a possibility. And I will leave it at that.
Okay.
But I will say that as I am an adult now, I often struggle. Like, church is an awful example, but I think sometimes on Sunday mornings, you have very limited capacity to pay attention. And I often have to get past the feeling of it's disrespectful to doodle while the reverend or the pastor is preaching. But then I find that as I'm doodling, that I'm really listening and I can talk about it afterwards. So
yeah,
very interesting kind of area of study there.
I've seen a couple YouTubers on BookTube. As they're talking, they put a secondary small image in the corner of the screen of a video game that's being played. And the whole idea of this is that you're watching the video game, but you're listening to the person speak. And then hopefully you're actually remembering more of what the YouTuber said. I don't know if it works. I actually find that setup distracting.
Yeah.
Like, I don't watch the corner image because it's too distracting for me. But it might work for some people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were watching a video a little bit ago where it was, I think it was a Vice documentary. And in the corner, they had somebody eating a sandwich. And we, for the life of us, Benedict, we couldn't figure out what the heck this was about. But it makes sense now that you say it. And I wonder if focusing on this mundane thing happening allows your brain to just relax, right?
Yeah.
And then you can think about other things while also listening to what's going on. So it's very interesting how that works, because we've been told for so long that you can't multitask.
Like, true multitasking is not a thing, which I don't agree with, because I can drive and listen to an audiobook. That's multitasking. But that's really the only kind of multitasking I personally like to do.
But I would argue that those are both, they don't require active brain skills. Driving
does.
Yes, but
I'm not thinking, okay, now I'm putting my foot on the gas. Now I'm putting my foot on the brake.
It's become a routine. It's not like I can send 15 emails for work that require my explicit focus while also doing a training for a brand new thing. Like, those require two very attuned parts of my brain.
Right. And I could tell you I can't do that and listen to music or listen to an audiobook.
No,
either.
I can't at all.
I need quiet.
Yeah.
I want quiet is what I should say.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, it is. Clearly, we could keep talking about it for hours and hours.
Moving on.
Yes. Jumping into 4th grade. What are you bringing to the table?
More feel-good books for the most part. My 4th grade teacher was Mrs. Fisher. I loved her so much. I think because she was young. I'm pretty sure she was newly out of school, newly married, had lots of energy. And I specifically remember she was in love with a singer named Engelbert Humperdinck. I know you're laughing.
Humperdinck.
I know. But she loved him and she talked about him in class a lot. I didn't know who he was. It's not like you could just go and Google him if you wanted to back then. But she thought he was fabulous. Anyway, she read us many good books. I remember 3 in particular that I want to talk about today. And they're all pretty well known, I think, as far as children's literature. The first book is Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. That is by Robert C. O'Brien. I'm pretty sure this is an award winner of a book. It is about a mother mouse. Her name is Mrs. Frisby. Her husband is missing, presumed dead. She has a small family, and they live in a farmer's field. The farmer is getting ready to plow the field, and she needs help moving her family to safety. So she approaches a very special group of rats that live under the rose bush on this farmer's land. And she goes to them and asks them for help. They are friends of her husband. So she's relying on that friendship to get them to help her.
Sure.
The rest of the story is just the adventure of moving them, the things that they have to do. Plus you get all this background about the rats and who they really are, and more information about Mrs. Frisby's husband.
Yeah.
It's a very action-packed type of story. You have talking animals. The animals, some of them are extremely unusual and gifted. And I just remember being enamored with the home of the rats. It's very well concealed. When you go in the rose bush and down in the tunnels, there's carpeted floors. They have electricity. They have this huge library.
Ooh.
It's just fascinating. And my 4th grade brain just ate that up like candy. This is another book I shared with you guys in the form of an audiobook. I think we listened to it on the way to a vacation place. Yeah, it was an audiobook we listened to while traveling, and we all loved it. I purchased the book, and I know at least Mark and Aaron read it on their own. I don't know if you did. But
I don't think I have.
Yeah, just a great, great book to share with kids because, again, it just tickles the imagination so perfectly. The second book is, well, you mentioned it already, Julia, Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. This is probably the quintessential classic children's book. I was reading on Goodreads, and one gentleman said that he believes it's an example of the perfect novel. If you read Strunk and White's Elements of Style and the recommendations they make for writing, this novel just perfectly answers all of that. It is a beautifully written book, but I don't think in 4th grade I gave that one second of thought.
Yeah, sure.
If you're unfamiliar with this story, it is about a pig named Wilbur who is saved from being killed by a young girl named Fern. Because she saves him, he's allowed to grow up in the barnyard. You meet all of his very unique friends. They all have names, all the animals talk. And there's one specific friend named Charlotte, who's a spider, who plays a very pivotal role in saving Wilbur's life for the second time. It's a beautiful book. It does have some sadness, does have a happy ending, which you would expect from a kid's book. I just remember loving the story so much. The gentleman on Goodreads who was doing the review also said that his teacher was cruel because not only did she read the story to them and make them all sad, but then she forced them to watch the movie in class and then make everybody miserable because they were all crying in front of each other. I don't remember anybody crying in my class, but I do remember really loving that story.
Yeah, and really he's not wrong. There is no embarrassment like crying in class.
Oh, I agree 100%. 100%. The third book I want to share is also just a fun book, and that is The Borrowers by Mary Norton. This is a book about a family, well, actually a community of very tiny people that live within the walls of a home. And they borrow things from the big people that live in the home whenever they need it. So I just remember thinking that when we lost stuff in our house, it was probably the borrowers taking it for their own use in their own homes in the walls of our house.
Yeah.
Very imaginative, just wonderful reading and story.
Yeah. I think I read The Borrowers after I had seen the initial movie. And I think the borrowers did for me what the Mushroom Planet did for you in sparking that curiosity and that wonderment. And yeah, I love the idea. No, I don't think I would love it in actuality, but I love the idea of this community of people small enough to live within the walls of the home and creatively use what we understand to be like a matchstick, for example.
Miscellany.
Right.
Yeah.
We would use a matchstick to light a match, but then they would use a matchstick for whatever other purpose. So
A chair leg.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Or a paddle on a boat, right?
Uh-huh.
So just so much creativity that I think maybe that's another realm we need to add to our time machine.
Yeah.
Travel. Yeah.
Travel to the borrower's universe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very fun book. And as I'm talking about these books, Julia, you mentioned how the books you remember most, a lot of them have a lot of emotional heft.
Mm-hmm.
The books I remember the most are the ones that carry just an incredible amount of creative thought and imaginative storytelling, very fantastical, that require you to stretch a little bit in your beliefs to accept the story as is. But I'm still that kind of reader. I am still willing to suspend disbelief for certain types of stories. And I just think this is the beginning of that development for me in my preferences for stories.
Yeah. I think it's a very good observation because as much as I would have loved to remember those creative stories, I am just not designed that way, unfortunately. Because my next book is a very sad story.
All right. I rolled my eyes.
I know. And it's, listen, if I could remember any others, I would, but...
Okay, tell us about this story.
I will. But I will say first, again, this is a book that I don't know for sure if it was read
in fourth
grade or not. It could have been second. It could have been first. It could.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a memory of the teacher who read it, but in my little brain, my second grade and my fourth grade teacher could probably look the same in my memory.
Okay.
So
well, share it with us.
I will. This story is Treasure in an Oatmeal Box, the story of a special boy and the people who loved him by Ken Gire. I'm going to talk about my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Boyle.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that I am not sure that this book is actively in print anymore.
Okay.
You can find it on Amazon. I have looked. You can also find it probably on Panko Books or any of the
thrift books.
Yeah.
Anywhere you can get secondhand books.
Thrift store. Never skip those thrift store book sections. I found so many TBR books on there. This story, again, I just took this straight from Goodreads. It's the bittersweet tale of love, trials, tragedies, and triumphs of a 10-year-old mentally handicapped Kevin Hallis and his family. It's a sad, short story that had a major emotional impact on me, and I can't really explain why without ruining the story. But Kevin has a twin sister, and the dynamic between the two of them, I remember being touching for me. If I'm remembering correctly, and again, Goodreads and other places, because this book is so old, doesn't have a solid synopsis. This book was written at a time where there were treasures in oatmeal boxes.
Yeah. Breakfast cereal boxes.
Yeah. And Kevin is really into outdoorsy, Boy Scouty things, and the treasure in this particular oatmeal box that he wants is another item related to that, whether it's a compass or a carabiner or something. And it's the story of him, working towards that, and then what happens when he finally gets it and the aftermath from that. Mm-hmm. This book, for me, the sadness that is the end of this book, I was carrying with me out the hallway, down onto the school bus, all the way home, while also developing a fever.
So you really weren't feeling good physically.
No. And I must have been struggling to hold it together because I remember getting home and it was either you or Dad. I think it was Dad.
Yeah. I don't remember this, so it must
Yeah.
have been your dad.
had gotten a phone call from school saying that my teacher thought I looked really sad and I didn't look well, and could you please check on me? And I wasn't in school the next day because I definitely had a fever.
Yeah, you were sick.
So I remember that compounded experience of being really sad and also suddenly very, very sick for just out of the blue. and the embarrassment of my teacher calling home.
That's quite a memory.
Clearly it was traumatic. But I think this story, much like as we've talked about, of teachers creating a space to be able to talk about and creating space for difficult subjects, I think this book fit in very well with that. Again, not remembering exactly which teacher, but I am thankful that I was exposed to some of these books young, because it, I think, helped me develop my sense of compassion maybe a little bit earlier. Yeah. Well, the empathy kicked in pretty hard with all of these HSP experiences.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my 4th grade.
Okay.
What is your 5th grade? Is it happy?
It is.
Okay.
It's not happy, but it's not sad like you're discussing. It's more weird and eerie. My 5th grade teacher, Mr. Hoyne, just really seemed to like to read creepy books to us. Not full-on horror, I would say, or not horror that would be recognized as slasher, screaming, monstery horror. It was more what's scary in real life. So I was saying earlier that most of the books from elementary school kind of that I remember really fed into my love of fantasy and the fantastical. Mr. Hoyne introduced me to eerie, weird, kind of creepy books, and I like those as well. So in 5th grade, Mr. Hoyne read to us 2 books. The first one is very well known by Shirley Jackson, called We Have Always Lived in the Castle. And the second book is a very not well-known book. It's not in print anymore. You have to get it secondhand if you want it. It is called Dorp Dead by Julie Cunningham. So I'm going to talk about Dorp Dead first because it's the least well-known of the books.
Sure.
It's about a boy who lives in an orphanage, and he is not adopted, but he is taken in by a man who keeps this boy on a very rigid type of schedule, very strict expectations for him. He bordering on abusive behavior, definitely emotionally abusive. The story follows him as he lives with this man, and you get this building sense of dread. I can't even tell you why. It's just the way the author writes the book. Until you get to a point where this boy just makes a discovery, a very ugly, scary discovery. And the rest of the book is how he deals with that discovery. The book itself is very short, has a very dark, foreboding sense to it. The ending is somewhat open-ended as well. So I don't like open-ended endings for the most part, but it certainly fits this story.
Sure.
I just remember when this book was done, and even while Mr. Hoyne was reading it, just really having a sense of something terrible going to happen. And even when the book was finished, that sense of terribleness didn't go away. So that's the first book. Then the second book, of course, is We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Very well known. Told in first person by Mary Cat, who is a teenage girl who lives with her sister and her old Uncle Julian in kind of a rundown mansion. They live a very isolated life as outsiders in this town. There's some animosity between them in the town, and you figure out why that is. Mary Cat herself is very unique, and you are in her brain. So be prepared for that. Then what gets the story moving along is a cousin, an unknown cousin of theirs, comes and stays with them. And he kind of instigates things and turns everything upside down. And the rest of the story is the consequences of that.
Okay.
This is definitely, I don't want to say horror, but there's a lot of psychological unease in this story. There's commentary on mob mentality. There's commentary on, do we ever really know what the truth is? And it just, underneath it all, it feels to me like a Southern Gothic story, but I don't even know if it takes place in the South.
Okay.
So it was my first introduction to Shirley Jackson, and really my first introduction to this kind of scary, creepy story. But I loved every second of it. I loved every second of it. And I still like reading stories like this that look at horror in real life. So we're not talking about monsters. We're not talking about ghosts. We're not talking about vampires. We are talking about the real world and the scary stuff that happens in the real world. So
okay.
Very, very good. And again, my first introduction to that, and I continue to enjoy reading those types of stories. Not all the time, but occasionally. Definitely in the fall. Those are the stories I want to pick up.
Yes. We have always lived in the castle at Target or Barnes & Noble last year, and I am so excited to read that this fall.
It's a very good book. There's a lot of depth there that I think as a fifth grader I missed out on, but I certainly pick up on now.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very good.
Yeah.
And I loved Mr. Hoyne. He was a very supportive teacher for me personally. And I appreciate him so much. And I appreciate the books he chose to read to us because he was trusting that we were a little bit more mature and could handle the themes in these books.
Sure.
So what about you, Julia? What's your fifth grade book?
Well, my fifth grade teacher, I think, was kind of the same. My teacher was Mr. Rom, and he is in my top 5 favorite teachers of all time. Elementary through even college. Just, how do I even begin to describe what being in that class was like? Every day we had a word wall, and every day we were given a new word to learn. Words that for fifth graders felt like 75-cent words. Like they were
not even 25 cents.
Right.
We've surpassed that.
Right.
Yes.
And he had a jar of jelly beans that every time, if we were doing an exercise with words or with math or something, you could get a jelly bean out of the jelly bean jar. And he loved to go around and offer the Harry Potter bamboozled beans to us sometimes too. And he wore a different tie and a different pin every day. He had walked the Appalachian Trail and loved sharing his stories with us, had pictures of national parks all over his room.
Sent postcards to his kids.
Yes. Yeah.
His students.
Right. Whenever we would get to the Civil War time period, Lewis and Clark in history, he had a full, I don't know if it's the right term, but like a coon suit, like
a trapper suit.
Yes, that he would wear. He took us to Gettysburg for a field trip at the end of the year, and we were all supposed to memorize the Gettysburg Address. And for those of us that were up for the challenge, he took us on a compass tour of the field. He was one of the most inspiring teachers in that he made learning and education feel inspiring. If how I'm saying that makes sense. Like it was tangible and fun and could be easy and could be engaging. So he read many good stories to us. There were several good ones that we read as a class. But the ones that he read to us either before lunch or after lunch were both, were all really grand. The one that I want to talk about, though, is the Sammy Keyes mystery series.
Did he read more than one?
Yes.
Okay.
The one that I remember is The Skeleton Man, but I know that he read others. And I guess maybe I should also clarify. In reading these books, it was a joint class. So there were 2 fifth grade classes, and we would all sit together and read. So Mr. Rom would take turns, or the other fifth grade teacher would take turns reading. So he read it to us, but then also the other teacher did too. Anyway, Sammy Keyes mysteries, they are fast-paced, funny, thoroughly modern.
So based in the current time frame. Okay.
Yeah. They feel like an older version of the Kim Jansen mysteries.
Okay. That's a great comparison.
if you know Kim Jansen, I was reading her when I was younger. And so Sammy Keys felt like the next step. Each mystery I remember feeling as complex and unsolvable at the first time you encounter it, and it's engaging and always unfolding. And Sammy herself feels very spunky and determined, and she is not going to let the adult police officers tell her that she can't help solve this. And the voice that she has in these stories, I remember feeling as very relatable. Maybe not for me in my personality, but as somebody that I would encounter
your age in the real world. She also had a ton of stuff going on in her personal life too. Her father just was totally mysterious, whether dead or out of the picture or just this crazy shadowy figure in her life. Her mother was a soap star, so she had some sort of money that she was able to pull from. And her mom always showed up on a jet plane in a scarf around her head and sunglasses. And then the person that she was interested in, Casey, also. So there were all of these dynamics that were always moving. And I remember the feeling of listening to these words was very you could really settle in and listen to these stories and feel like every single character in it was very dynamic and understandable and easy to listen to. So sounds like a good time.
Yeah, it was
I love mysteries, so I could see how this would have been very appealing to me.
Yeah, this was a ton of fun. I have even searched them and added them to my book wish list so I can have them as part of my collection someday because they were a ton of fun.
Right, and you might enjoy, just for nostalgia's sake, going back and reading a few or all of them.
Right, and I might find that Sammy Keys herself is absolutely I can't stand her now, but I want to have that chance to read her now as an adult.
I mean, I can honestly say that other than, I think, The Enormous Egg, I have reread all of the books that I've mentioned today.
Well, and you're in an interesting spot because if you haven't read them to us, you've been in situations where, we could talk about them as a family.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting perspective to have as well on those books.
And I think it says something for the longevity of the books, that not only did I enjoy them when I was a child, truly, I enjoyed sharing them with you and some decades later, and you guys enjoyed them as well. So they definitely have proven some longevity, and you will probably find, if you do the same thing with your books, that may be the case as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm going to read any of my sad books anytime soon. Year of the Dog, probably, but yeah, I think that's very true too.
Well, we've talked about a lot of good books. I think even more than that, we've demonstrated how important our teachers are to our developing a love of reading, and also maybe the types of books that we like to read. So I think I just want to close today thanking our elementary school teachers for the time and the effort and the thought they put into developing curriculum. And I realize they have a certain standard they have to meet with their curriculum.
Right.
But the choices that they make in selections for reading to kids when there's nobody telling them what they have to read.
Yeah.
As school is pretty much getting ready to start right around the corner, when this episode goes up, there will only be 2 weeks left in August. I can't believe it.
Thank goodness.
And I hope that kids go back to school and have a great school year this year. It's been a rough go the last several school years, so I'm hoping that this time around things will feel settled, and teachers and students alike will feel like they're ready to have a good year together.
Right. That it's a good, engaging, safe year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Listeners, thank you for joining us today as we just walk down memory lane and spend a lot of time being nostalgic for things that happened many years ago.
Yes.
I hope that maybe we sparked some memories for you too, and the experiences you had in school with your teachers reading to you. if you'd like, you can share some of your favorite book memories from school on Facebook with us or on Instagram. And if you are feeling so moved, we would appreciate if you reviewed us or rated us on Apple Podcasts. It just helps with the algorithm to make us more visible to more people who might enjoy listening to us.
Yeah.
You can always share us with fellow readers and book lovers as well. We would appreciate any of that. Before we close, I just want to let you know that coming up next, we are going to be talking about reading slumps, reading ruts, or maybe, what could I say, reading stalls, where you just can't seem to get your reading going to the extent that you want it to, or you're having trouble finding books you really want to read. One of us is experiencing that right now. I was going to say, hint, it's not me, but we just thought it would be a good time to talk about what it's like, some of the things that a person can do to maybe get out of a reading slump or help their reading life a little bit. And we're going to discuss whether it's even that big of a deal.
Yeah.
If you're in a reading slump, just be in the slump and let life go on.
Right.
So anyway, those are some of the things we're going to talk about the next time around here in the Book Snug. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. We appreciate you so much and are so glad that you're here. And we hope that you join us again in the next chapter.
Bye, friends. We'd love for you to continue today's conversation with us at the BookSnug_podcast on Instagram and at the BookSnug podcast on Facebook. All of our episodes can be found wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as at our website, thebooksnugpodcast.buzzsprout.com, where show notes for every episode can be found. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at thebooksnugpodcast@gmail.com.
As C.S. Lewis, one of our favorite authors, famously said, "You can never have a cup of tea large enough or a book long enough to suit me." And we wholeheartedly agree.